Welcome back to the Twin Spires Racing Roundtable. I'm Ashley Anderson here with James Scully and Vance Hanson, back for some more point counterpoint for our 99th episode of the Roundtable. Today we're going to reflect back on Fort Washington's win in the Grade 1 Arlington Million and whether his future is brighter than his stablemate Integration, who was third in that race. We'll also look at the Breeders' Cup chances of El Cordobas after his Sword Dancer win and close out with what else caught our eye from the weekend. So let's start things off, Vance. I will kick it over to you first, talking about Saturday at Colonial Downs. Shug McGahee had two in the Arlington Million, and Fort Washington came out ahead of his stablemate Integration, who's now 0 for 9 in Grade 1 races. Do you feel that Fort Washington will have the better career long term, and why would that be that he will have a better career than Integration?
Well, I mean, so far Fort Washington does have that grade one now after the million this past weekend. You know, if you look at his record up to this point, it's not spectacular, but he does have that edge over Integration now. And as you said, Integration is 0 for 9 at the top level. He was the beaten favorite in the 2024 Pegasus World Cup Turf. He's run second and third in the last two editions of the Arlington Million. Also, runner up in the Maker's Mark Mile, Pegasus World Cup, and Manhattan this year. And really, I would have to say Integration has really underachieved, especially the last two racing seasons. It just hasn't gotten those big wins like a lot of people and a lot of bettors have expected him to. And so, yeah, I mean, Fort Washington's going really hot right now. The Million was his third graded stakes win of the year. He won the Canadian Turf at Gulfstream, won the dinner party at Pimlico. You know, he's not a very world class top level grade one winner, of course, but so far you got to give him the slight edge now because Integration just simply isn't getting the job done despite multiple chances at the grade one level. And I'm a bit surprised also, I'll throw this in as well, that Integration was a really smart winner of the Red Smith last fall, going a mile and 3/8. And I really thought Shug McGahee and the rest of his connections would have kept him going longer, races beyond a mile and a quarter this year. But no, they've been running him more at a mile and an eighth, mile and a quarter, and he's been coming up short. I think a stretch back out to races like at a mile and 3/8 or a mile and a half could help him maybe get that elusive grade one win at some point.
James, you're taking the counterpoint here. So why might someone say that Integration will have the better career long term over Fort Washington?
I would take Integration right now, moving forward over Fort Washington. I mean, Fort Washington, he's raced 28 times, and uh, he was a better horse on Saturday. I don't know about that trip with Integration. I thought he was a little bit too forward in that race, and he struck the lead in the stretch, but he was ultimately proved no match for Grand Senada, who had won only one of his 16 previous starts. So kudos to Fort Washington for, like Vance said, earning his third stakes win in his last four attempts. So let's face it, until Saturday's grade one event, those other stakes wins he had were all at grade three events. He's been well exposed at the highest level, with the exception of a loss to Major Dude, who to me isn't that good in the grade two Fort Lauderdale earlier this year. Um, uh, Fort Washington has failed to hit the board in 7 previous attempts at grade one or grade two level. I don't think he's going to step up off of the victory in the Arlington Million and challenge better horses this fall. He's a 6-year-old right now. Integration, like Vance said, that was going to be my key point. I don't think he's running at the right distances. I mean, not only is he a multiple grade two winner who has placed in 6 grade one stakes and taken a lot of money and a lot of those appearances. But to me, he still has huge potential upside at longer distances. They tried to run him a mile and 3/8 again in that Manhattan, and when they switched it from the inner to the outer turf, they cut it back to or maybe it was a mile and 3/16, but still they cut it back to a mile and an eighth. I want to see him go a mile and a half and see what he can do at longer distances. He still only raced 15 times. Integration didn't come along until the fall of his 3-year-old season. He's getting ready to enter the fall of his 5-year-old season. He's won 5 times. He's got 4 seconds. He's got 2 thirds. I still think I've seen these older horses for Shoaib McGahee, like Point of Entry and others, who really like peak out, once they get to be like age 5, 6 and older. And I still think Integration has some potential upside. He's going to have to prove it, but I think he's a better prospect at the highest level moving forward than Fort Washington is. I just don't see Fort Washington stepping up and challenging better horses in the future.
It is worth noting that Junior Alvarado, since picking up the mount on Fort Washington, we've seen a totally different horse. Got that first ride with Fort Washington in the Pegasus World Cup Turf, finished fifth that day, but then got those 2 Grade 3 wins, finished fourth in the Wise Dan, and then got this Grade 1 in the Arlington Million. So maybe the rider switch was a key here. And Junior even said that previously Fort Washington was just lost for the longest time, and other jockeys forced him to do things he didn't want to do. And he said that he was going to do what he wants to do. And it seems like they do have some kind of chemistry that's working very, very well. That said, obviously, Integration had a very star-studded 3-year-old season, and we just haven't seen the same horse these last 2 seasons. And the 0 for 9 in the Grade 1s is quite a negative to have on your resume. But I thought, in the Grade 1 Arlington Million at Colonial, that was a course, that was a track that Integration really liked. He was 3 for 4 at Colonial heading into the Arlington Million this time around, and was a runner-up to Nation's Pride last year. I didn't think we had the highest of caliber horses this time around in the Arlington Million compared to last year. I thought Nation's Pride was a little bit better than maybe the best in this field, but the fact that Integration still didn't get the job done when it seemed like this was maybe, of all the Grade 1s he's had, the closest to a gimme, it does leave some concern. Why does he not show up in these Grade 1 races? I have to ask too, and either of you can answer this, with Mystic Dan, he obviously made his turf debut and finished fourth, which, it was a respectable fourth considering it was his first time on the turf. But Kenny McPeak has come out and said that the Breeders' Cup Dirt Mile is the likely target, and maybe the ACAC or the Lucas Classic is next for him at Churchill Downs. Do you all feel like that's the right move, going for the Breeders' Cup Dirt Mile?
Absolutely. I think it's his best chance to get a Grade 1 win during the fall. They don't run Grade 1 dirt races during the fall as preps, and I think the Classic will be too difficult a challenge. And I think if he gets a good prep for that race. Listen, he ran fourth in that Arlington Million. Somebody had to be fourth in that race. He didn't run terribly, but it wasn't turf. It didn't look like his surface to me on Saturday. I think a race like the Dirt Mile gives him an opportunity, gives him a possibility to go out with some glory this fall. And I totally understand McPeak's rationale there.
Anything to add, Vance, or do you want to move over to the Sword Dancer?
No, I agree with James's assessment of Mystic Dan for the rest of the season.
Well, let's talk about Saratoga, where we had the Grade 1 Sword Dancer won by El Cordobas, who got the win for Charlie Appleby and Godolphin. He punched his ticket to the Breeders' Cup Turf at Del Mar on November 1st. He was the lesser heralded of 2 from Appleby's barn. We also had Nation's Pride in that race. James, tell us why El Cordobas could be a serious contender in the Breeders' Cup Turf.
Well, listen, he is a 4-year-old gelding who returned from an 8.5-month layoff earlier this year and was fully making his first career start earlier this year. Now, he's really progressed since then for Charlie Appleby and Godolphin. He has now won 3 of his last 4 starts at a 1.5-mile distance, was coming off a Group 2 win in England. And I thought this was a career best performance by a progressing horse that absolutely has a chance to make, I think, a major impact in the Breeders' Cup Turf this fall. This son of Franco has really found his best form, going 12 furlongs. I don't think we get the deepest fields year in and year out for the Breeders' Cup Turf. I think typically the Breeders' Cup Mile comes up a lot more salty. And yeah, I look at Rebel Red. He can't compete at the great Group 1 level or win at the Group 1 level in England, but he's found Breeders' Cup Turf to be right up his alley twice. He's going to be the horse to beat this fall in my eyes, but I think El Cordobes might have a chance to beat him. And the thing about Saturday, I thought it was an outstanding performance where he overcame adversity. Nation's Pride, like you said, won the Million last year. He can't get a mile and a half. He was up by 2.5 lengths in upper stretch. He probably would have won the Arlington Million if he had been in Colonial Downs. He just came up. He ran his race and he came up short because of the 12 furlong distance. El Cordobes, to me, looks like a horse that is just moving forward and could be set for a peak performance this fall, Vance.
I think you meant Rebels Romance. Rebel Red was in the race, but Rebels Romance, the one to beat in the
Oh,
Breeders'
I
Cup
meant
Turf.
Rebels Romance. Yeah, that's who I meant for the. And he's the other Godolphin horse, and I'm sure Vance will talk about him. But I thought that was an outstanding performance. It shows that he can hold his own in the U.S. in Group Ones with El Cordobes. El Cordobes.
Vance, why do you think El Cordobes isn't one to respect in the Breeders' Cup Turf?
Well, he is kind of. I like James's point that he is a 4-year-old and he does have back-to-back graded stakes wins, including you mentioned the Princess of Wales's at Newmarket. However, that was only a 4-horse field that he won at Newmarket, and it was not a very distinguished field. Sword Dancer had some of the better American turf horses, and they didn't run to snuff here. Now, saying all that, El Cordobes, he has to beat his Godolphin stablemates, and a couple of them who have already qualified for the Breeders' Cup Turf look much more imposing than he does at this point. Ombudsman won the Prince of Wales's at Royal Ascot. He's going to be running in the Juddmonte International next week at York. I don't know if he's going to stretch out to a mile and a half, but I would suspect that trainers John and Thady Gosden would think that horse could get a mile and a half much easier against top level company than he could in England. And then, of course, Rebels Romance, we'll I'll touch on just a little bit later. 2-time great Breeders' Cup Turf winner. Obviously has winning experience at Del Mar, and he's been campaigned as a significantly better and more talented horse than El Cordobes has at this point. So I'm not going to put it past El Cordobes to be a major threat in the Breeders' Cup Turf, but there's at least one, if not two, horses that are carrying the Godolphin Blue at this point that are much more logical winners of the Breeders' Cup Turf.
Yeah, I don't have much more to add to that. El Cordobes did record a 107 Brisnet speed figure, tied for the highest stakes speed figure this weekend, but we've all talked about it. Rebels Romance obviously has proven himself in this race and is going to be the one to beat. And we'll need to see a lot more from El Cordobes going forward to prove that he can take down that stablemate who had a 109 in the Breeders' Cup Turf last year. So I think we probably all are looking to who's racing overseas and coming over for the Breeders' Cup Turf because they always seem to do the best in that race. Well, we'll close out. Or any other thoughts there?
No.
Okay. We'll close out with our final points. What caught our eye from the weekend? Vance, tell us about Rebels Romance.
Such a neat horse. I forget how old he is now. I think he's like 7. And he continues to win Group 1 after Group 1 overseas. And the latest was this past weekend in Berlin, the Grosser Price von Berlin at Hopgarden. He didn't get the best of tracks, I think. I think it was probably a little softer than he prefers, but he did grind out the victory here by about 3/4 of a length over a pretty decent French horse named Yonko, who was a Group 1 winner in Hong Kong a couple of seasons ago. So this, Rebels Romance was 1-5 here. He was widely expected to win, and he did. But Yonko is a pretty good measuring stick, I think, and so it was a pretty gutsy performance. Rebels Romance, this was his 8th Group 1 victory in his career. 4 have come in Germany, which doesn't have the best racing in Europe, but still it's quite an accomplishment. I referenced his 2 Breeders' Cup Turf wins earlier in his career. He's also has Group 1 wins in Dubai and Hong Kong, and a pair of Group 2 victories in the UK this year in the Yorkshire Cup and the Hardwick at Royal Ascot. So the main thing that's missing from his resume is a Group 1 win in England. I don't think he's necessarily ever going to get that, but for me, based on the form that he's shown again this year, he is the horse to beat in the Breeders' Cup Turf at Del Mar. He could be the first three-peat winner of that race, and he's going to prep for the Breeders' Cup in the Canadian International at Woodbine over a mile and a half next month. So it'll be nice to see Rebels Romance back on the American shores sooner rather than later, and he looks very solid going into the Breeders' Cup final prep season in the coming weeks.
I love the job that Charlie Appleby has done, like keeping Rebels Romance and getting him ready for the fall and for the Breeders' Cup. And that's even with that El Cordobas, he's a gelding, so he's just going to keep running for as long as he can. But way back in 2022 at Keeneland, Nation's Prod was the favorite of the Breeders' Cup Turf, and he ran fifth. And Rebels Romance, won it. And just to see those two horses still competing at the highest level, I think it's great that Appleby does that. For my what else section, I'm going to hit a 2-year-old maiden watch. I'm going to go around. I'll start at Del Mar, where Balboa, not this time, colt for Bob Baffert, one second time out. He had run third to stablemate Brandt, who was like odds on that day and real impressive. And Balboa came back, broke his main by 7 3/4 lengths, got a 91 Brisnet speed rating. We also had Desert Gate go 2 for 2, winning the best pal for Baffert, and Omaha Beach Colt, and Hamika, a daughter of Curlin for Baffert, improved to 2 for 2, winning the Grade 3 Sereno. But Balboa is the maiden of the week at Del Mar. At Ellis Park, I will put the spotlight on Infiltrate. Last summer, Brendan Walsh debuted East Coast at Ellis Park. He was an impressive wire-to-wire winner, went on and won the Grade 1 Breeders' for Charity. Next out, Infiltrate sat up close, so he didn't have everything his own way, but he drew off the win by 3.5, going 6 furlongs on the main track. He's by Oscar Performance out of a flatter mare. Plenty of stamina in those bloodlines, and turf will always be an option, but a really good-looking maiden winner. Also had Comport, Romp in the Ellis Park Juvenile for Eddie Keneally, and Chopsticks, a daughter of Essential Quality, win the debutante stakes at Ellis for Brad Cox. She's 2 for 2. And then the maiden of the week at Saratoga is going to be, it's not going to be the fastest performer of the week. That's more like colts like Napoleon Solo and Golden Tornado and Carmel Coast. It's going to be the most impressive visually, and that was AI. If you did not see this colt run on Friday in race 6 at Saratoga, he hits the gate at the start. He's at least 20 lengths back on the backstretch of a 6 furlong maiden special weight. And not only does he launch this sensational rally from way off the pace, but he's running sideways. I mean, he's angling in and out. He gets a diagonal line down to the rail in mid-stretch, and then had 2 more gears left to win going away. At first asking for Joe Orsino, a son of Essential Quality. That freshman sire's coming on a little bit. We talked about Nick Sco recently, so going to just mention Essential Quality as a freshman sire who's doing well in this week's maiden watch.
It's a shame we didn't have that replay. The way you described it, I wish we had it going on live. But I will close out with some more Ellis Park as well, talking about Flying Dutchman's Big Truz, who romped to a 7-length win in the 1-mile Ellis Park Derby on Sunday. This is a 3-year-old by Justify, and he was an impressive 4-length winner on debut at Keeneland, and then placed second to Patch Adams in an allowance optional claimer. And his second start was third to the same rival in the Grade 1 Woody Stevens. And last out was 6th in the Grade 3 Indiana Derby, which Brian Lynch said that he may have wheeled him back too soon. But we just watched how he won dominantly on Sunday, getting back to the winner's circle for his second career win. He beat 5 rivals, including Delaware Derby winner Admiral Dennis for trainer Brad Cox. And the final time of 1:34.73 was just 0.4 of a second off the track record set in 2022 by Injunction. The victory also secured sire Justify his 50th individual black type stakes winner, and it was Tyler Gaffleone's 5th victory of 6 on the day. Tyler won with the Ellis Park Juvenile Stakes, the R.A. Cowboy Jones Stakes with Tumbarumba, also trained by Brian Lynch, and the Audubon Oaks with Sturgeon Moon. And after the race, Gaffleone said Big Trust felt like a winner the entire way, and Brian Lynch said he had been waiting for that breakthrough race. I know that the barn was really excited about Big Truz earlier this year, and we were waiting for that big win and finally got to see how impressive he was in the Ellis Park Derby. So very exciting for all the connections and for Justify as well, who has obviously made quite a name for himself, not only as a Triple Crown winner, but as a sire.
Yeah, good. Will Walden too. One of my favorite young horsemen. So yeah, I thought Big Truz was awesome at Ellis on Sunday.
All right. Well, I think that's all the time we have today for the Racing Roundtable. We will be back next week with more point counterpoint, since that is our new format, and it will be our 100th episode. So something to celebrate and look forward to. We will, I can't talk now. We will see you next Tuesday.